My name is Lisa Kohn. I'm 57 years old. I grew up a Moonie, a member of the Unification Church, and I have been shunned.
All right, Lisa. So, how did you become a member of the Moonies or the Unification Church in the first place? Is this something you were born in and always a part of?
No, actually, I was born into the hippie generation. So my parents were hippies. I was born in the 60s, if you could do the math, 63. And my parents, who met in high school, got my mom got pregnant, got married, whole thing, and babies having babies. And long story short, life was crazy. My parents split when I was young. It was a lot of insanity. It was everything that hippiness is. And then first off, in somewhere between second and third grade, my mom bought a van for my dad, and we were supposed to drive across country to live in a commune in California. And instead, my grandmother got sick, and we drove across New Jersey to live with my grandparents. And we stayed. My grandmother passed, and my mom stayed taking care of my grandfather. And then here it comes, January of 1974, my mom's friend who used to ask her, or used to hitchhike across country with her every summer, said, "You need to go hear Reverend Sung Myung Moon speak." And my mom went to hear him in Princeton, New Jersey, and came back enthralled. Took a couple months for anything to happen. And then somewhere in the early summer of 74, the Moonies convinced my mom to go up to Barrytown, New York, a huge indoctrination center. And my mom went up for the weekend and came back and went up for a week and came back and went up for another week, as happens, and basically spent the summer there. And one weekend, she drove my brother, Robbie, and I up, and we pull up in front of the big building, go into the huge gymnasium. All the women, all the sisters are sitting on one side of the room on the floor. All the men, the brothers are sitting on the other side of the room on the floor. And within moments, Reverend Sung Myung Moon walks in, and I have a Messiah, 10 years old, almost 11, 10 years old.
Wow. It's amazing that somebody can hear somebody speak one time and suddenly it's like, ooh, I've got to know more about this, and then you watch the progression of that.
I would say it's a combination of one, my mom was happy and found passion and enthusiasm and something she really believed in. And she had been, like primal screaming, silent days. She'd done it all. And so this was good. And what I try to explain to people that life was really crazy before the church. And so it was a haven, which is crazy, but true. And there were so many, there were like hundreds of young 20-something excited Moonies looking at me, 10-year-old me and 11-year-old brother of mine, or 11 and 12, whatever, and just loving us. And if enough people bow to a person and your mom says, bow to this person, pretty quickly, you're bowing, and once you bow, you believe, right? Once you believe, you bow. Once you bow, you believe. It's kind of the way the brain works. So it might have not been instantaneous, but I know we went home being like, this is great. And we just jumped in with my mom wholeheartedly.
I like what you said about once you bow, you believe. That need for internal and external consistency.
Yeah.
We're acting a certain way. We must believe that way.
I'm not crazy. If I'm bowing, this person must actually be holy. If I'm taking off my shoes, there's a reason. Absolutely. And as we know, indoctrination, it's a great way to get people indoctrinated. But yes.
So you said life was crazy before then.
Yeah.
And oftentimes these cults, these religions are the haven. They are you have vulnerable people who are hurting in some way, and then they find something that seems happy or provides them with community, consistency, some sort of a hope. And then, it gets them, it's kind of an escape from the life that they previously led. How did life change for you? I mean, because you had the 10-year-old you, that suddenly was brought into this. So do you remember? I mean, I know it's hard, 10 years old, but can you remember what it felt like to go from whatever life was before to joining that?
So maybe I make it up. Memory is a weird thing. I've written a memoir. Memory is a really weird thing. So before the church, my parents split when I was 2 or 3. There was some violence. Like I don't know that I remember it, but I know there was violence. So maybe I do. We ended up living with my mom, and We lived in this basement apartment, and she would go down the hall to the laundry room, and I would be standing in the doorway screaming because I thought she wasn't going to come back. Now, as an adult, I'm like, why didn't she take me with her? But that's a whole different conversation, right? So I was terrorized by my parents' split. I was terrified my mom was going to leave. I was the kid who wouldn't cross the street on a red light. Literally, I got lost in New York City in Greenwich Village on a huge Saturday with the art festival because my brother crossed and I refused to cross. So I got lost. Like I was goody two shoes, following all the rules, living with, my mom and dad. There's drugs and there's primal screaming and there's lots of sex going around and there's just craziness. So I was just like really terrified, frozen kid. And so I remember going in and feeling again the love around me, and that felt good. Feeling my mom being different, and there was more structure, and she stopped cursing and she started wearing a bra, and she started doing more normal things, which is funny. And just feeling, and also when I look back at it now, for many reasons in my early childhood, I knew something was wrong with me and I was sinful and I was damaged and all of that. And the church teaches that. Right? Oh, and by the way, we'll get into this later. I was best friends with his kids, right? So I'm playing with the Messiah's children and these other really amazing special children and other sinful me. So it just fit in so perfectly with everything in my brain, right? And as I say, you probably say too, as humans, we crave certainty, purpose, and community. And it was absolute certainty. I say all the time, there's nothing as intoxicating as having a Messiah. Even if he's not really the Messiah, it's like the best drug ever, right? You have absolute certainty, purpose. Now you know why you're here. Yeah, you're not. And I'm like, yeah, you remember that, right? It's a hard drug to put down. And then a community you will never find again like that, right? You just have to follow the rules to stay. So it filled all those things, and I could feel it, that sense of purpose, that connection to God. I mean, I used to walk down the street to school apologizing to God, praying and crying that I wasn't good enough, right? I'm 11, right? And so just so you understand, the story goes, so we join, and my mom just gets more and more and more involved. We live outside of New York City at this point with my grandfather, my mom, and my brother and I. And then in January of 1975, she sits us down and she says, I've been spending a lot of time there and I really feel like I need to be there more. What do you two think I should do? To which we say, you should probably leave. So she leaves. She moves into New York City, ironically, to help run the group that's for people who have kids and can't move into the church. And most of her time in the church, she is always caring for other people's children, for the blessed children in the church. So to this day, I meet people and they're like, wow, your mother took such good care of me when I was little. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Yeah, thank you for your
abandoned
faith.
us to do so.
Yeah, she abandoned us to do so.
Did you know
Exactly.
that at the time? Like as a child, did you know that your mom had left to go care for other children?
Yeah, it's for
Wow.
God and true parents and the Messiah. So she moves out, and I can tell you the rest of the story. But she moves out and a lot of things happen. But she never cries when she leaves us because she's told not to let us see her cry. I know it's wrong to miss her. I know I'm sinful for missing her. Like it just compounds on everything. And yeah, and people used to say, oh, thank you. You're so lucky. You're so wonderful to live without your mother. Oh my God. In the church, there's this concept of indemnity. Maybe you've heard it from other Moonies. You need to suffer to pay for the sins of your ancestors and so that your descendants don't have to suffer. So I was paying this incredible indemnity and soothing God's broken heart. So it's this huge feeling of power and how amazing I am and how awful I am because I don't want her to be gone. And I can't admit that I miss my mom because that's how sinful I am. I miss my mom.
Just
It's
think
a
about,
mind blank. It really is.
the gaslighting that's going on when you're being told that basically suffering is good. It's like
Yes.
shunning is loving. These,
Yes.
these are things
Yes.
that are not congruent.
Yes.
And it's just really sad the way that your emotions are even stifled, that you're not allowed to cry for your mom leaving. Mom's not allowed to cry as she leaves. And you're supposed to embrace the suffering. That's so damaging.
It's I've been out decades And I'm still unpacking the gaslighting of it, and the no wonder I have a hard time trusting my own sense, my own perception, my own. Have no wants, have no needs. Wasn't allowed to miss my mom. Wasn't all of that. I'm like, yes, thank you. Yeah, I feel so validated by just your face shaking at me. Yeah, it's unraveling that.
It just makes me. It makes. I'm angry, but below the anger is the sadness for a little you and for all of these people who are just giving up their normal base humanity and their feelings and their emotions to be so inauthentic and to be something that they're being coerced to be. It's awful.
Yeah, and you feel lucky for it at the time.
Sure.
Right. And I mean, we'll probably go into later the story with my mom, but to this day, I mean, only since the book came out in 2018 has she actually started to own. She's been out for a long decades too. Has she started to acknowledge the impact of what she did, right? Because she would literally call us, those kids she took care of. She would call me or my brother, and she would say, "Oh my God, I talked to so and so. They're so traumatized because their parents left them when they were little." And we'd be like, "Yeah, they are." Just this last year, she said to me, "Well, I never felt like I left you because you're always in my heart." I'm like, let's be really clear. You walked out and I never lived with you again. And you never came around. You never saw my life because we ended up moving in with my dad. So yeah, it's wacky. And to this day, she can't quite call it brainwashing, but I'm like, you must have been, because why else would you have done that and the other various things you did to us?
Yeah, love is an active quality. It's something that you show. And
yeah, love is a verb.
Loving.
Yeah.
I understand how she got there. I understand the brainwashing that goes on, but leaving isn't loving. And
leaving isn't loving. Yeah.
That's sad.
Yeah.
So what was the worldview that you were given as a little Mooney kid? How did it make you see? Because you already mentioned that you were kind of the rule follower, seemed very cautious. So how did that translate into how you saw the world through the eyes of the Unification Church and what you were being taught?
So definitely, we had the truth and the rest of the world is sinners, right? And I try and explain heavenly deception to people. And I try and explain why it's okay to lie and steal for God, right? Or why it's okay as a JW to go to the door of someone whose partner or spouse or parent has just died and say, "Oh, come with us and you'll see them forever," right? Like, because we're saving their soul. So I truly saw that this was the truth and the rest of the world was sinful. And I had to suffer and fight, be God's warrior, right? Marching on, heavenly soldiers. I can still hear this song in my head. So there's one. Two, and so what happens is my mom moves out and I am in 6th grade. I'm shopping, cooking, cleaning, running the house, doing everything, and crying because I'm not good enough on my way to school in the morning. We're living with my grandfather. My grandfather is a judge. And when my grandmother died, he got depressed and he stopped practicing his cases. And then when my mom left, he got more depressed. And then he got disbarred for not practicing his cases. And then apparently the police are doing this, circling the block on a suicide watch for him because he's so depressed. And he has to go to court and maybe to jail. So instead they put him in the psychiatric ward. And at this point, I'm in 7th grade, Robbie's in 8th grade. They pull us out of school one day and they kind of shuffle us around to all these different people's houses. They go to get my mom, who says, "Not my problem," and doesn't come back. Yep, not my problem, and doesn't come back. And then eventually my father, who's Danny, which I can explain, Danny comes and gets us and moves us into New York City to live with him in New York City's East Village in the 70s when it was just seedy and not cool. And so I'm living with my dad in a life of sex, drugs, and squalor. Like, he's a hippie and he does a lot of drugs. He used to offer to jokingly sell me to his friends for drugs. Like, it was like, this is his whole crazy life. So I am, not only is the world satanic and sinful and needs to be saved, but I'm living with Satan, right? Believing in the Messiah, living with Satan on a daily basis, wanting to save my father, to bring him back in. And then just, again, it just, when I look back on it now, fell right into and multiplied all my knowledge that I was damaged and that I was not okay because of things that had happened to me when I was younger. Because we're taught God has suffered and we've broken God's heart for so many years. And because I was friends with Moon's children, with the Messiah's children, the true children. And then there's these blessed children born without original sin from these huge marriages, the huge blessings. and then there's sinful me, right? And so like it's just set up for me to know that I'm wrong. And I also knew that, you know, my brothers and sisters were working so hard for God and there was nothing I could do. So I just became really loving and sacrificial and took care of people, which is still in my, you know, so it just kind of solidified. It gave me power and strength because it gave me belief, but it also solidified my knowledge of how wrong I was. And yeah, it was everything. It was just like, this is, I don't know. People are like, how do you believe? I'm like, I don't know. It's in the air you breathe. It's in the water you drink. How do you become any religion? Oh, you're told and you believe and it's true. I mean, that's
Sure. Well, and
at
you're
some
told
point,
by
that's what
people
it
that
is.
you love or
Trust.
respect.
Right.
So how did it, so your dad then never joined?
Mm-mm.
So how were you then? So if your mom splits and takes off to go work on the inside, how did you take this on? How were you being taught? What was were you going to some sort of a Mooney church or?
So
How'd
we
they
lived in
keep
New
you
York
in the
City
loop?
with my dad. And at that point in the beginning, my mom lived in New York City. So, or even when we were still in Jersey, we would go and visit her on the weekends, or at least go up on Sundays, and go for church center for Sunday school or Sunday sermons, or we go and stay with my mom and help out with whatever she was doing. So I would be there. And even then when my mom ended up in upstate New York or in DC for a while, then I would just go to the church center and glom myself onto other people. So yeah, if I Monday through Friday, I was home with Danny every weekend, every holiday, every summer, every chance I could, I would be at the church. Yeah.
So then in one world, you have your time with your dad, but in the other world, it seems like when you have time with your mom, is it really time with your mom or is it more just time with the church?
Yeah. I mean, even when we used to, in the beginning, we used to go visit my mom and she would, you know, there was a while she was the mom for one of the centers, like the mom for all the members. And whenever we would see her, we go out to eat. If we had money, we go out to eat, but she'd always bring somebody. She would never spend time alone with us because she was like, love them all. You want to love all your brothers and sisters. And they would all, again, always say, oh, your mom is such a good mom to us. She takes such good care of us. And we'd be like, great, I know. We're so happy she does. Like, I can't even, and I didn't even know that I didn't feel differently.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. Okay.
Because I couldn't feel differently.
Okay. Because so my dad was very emotionally abusive. He was an elder in the congregation. He was not a nice guy inside the house. To everyone on the outside, there was a whole different him that was seen. But he would give talks about happy family life. And I know that myself, I just sat there feeling sick. Like, how's this guy saying this stuff on the platform? Because that's not who he is. But you're saying that you couldn't even go there. Okay.
You know, I look at the second gens I've met, the Moonies second gens, you know, those of us born and raised since the book was coming out and I started finding this community. And so many of them knew by the time they were 10, 11, 12, 13, like they just knew it was wrong and they didn't believe and they knew their family life did not support what was said. Everybody's path is different, right? It's not better or worse, but I just absolutely knew that I was wrong and it was right. I mean, so the summer, right before the summer between my sophomore and junior year of high school, my mom put me on the IOWC, the International One World Crusade. She sent me out to Seattle to proselytize for the summer. Because up till then, she got rid of me. Because up till then, we'd have these fights. I would go see her on the weekend and she'd be like, you're mad at me. And I'm like, I'm not mad. She would say, you're mad that I left. And I'm like, I'm not mad at all. Because I never knew I could not feel mad or sad or broken or abandoned. I was lucky. I was told I was lucky. I had to believe I was lucky because otherwise I was breaking God's heart. So it just I thank you for your face because I'm like, oh my God, how hard that must have been that I still don't even realize how hard it was. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, you are also the kid who wouldn't cross the red light, right? And so you were the rule follower, people pleaser, and I was in many other ways. So
Yeah,
there were many other things that I didn't see, right? Like
yeah.
we all have
We
the
all have.
places, the
Yeah.
blind spots. And so
Y- y-
but it says something that they can kind of get a human being to abandon their own feelings to that degree.
Beyond belief, right? Absolutely. And you have to understand, I mean, I've been in this recovery thing. If I'm 57 and I left almost 40 years ago, give or take, my brother said to me not that long ago, you even try to do imperfect perfectly. Right. And it's true, right? My perfectionism and that thing is deeply carved in me from before the church and then exacerbated by the church, right? And so I have to work hard not to try and, not be perfect in my not being perfect kind of thing. It's like this thing. Yeah,
As
because
a
it just,
coach, yeah, as a coach who works with people on these things,
yes.
perfectionism is a hallmark oftentimes. And
Uh-huh.
it and I'm a recovering, and I just say I will always be a perfectionist in recovery.
Yes,
Some
me
people
too.
call perfectionism process addiction. It is kind of an addiction in some ways, and um, going down certain paths, and to watch other individuals as well as they start to work on perfectionism, start to feel like they have to do that perfectly as well instead of embracing the imperfect. But it's what we do, and it's
That's what
a
we do.
byproduct of your whole life never being good enough. You keep saying it. That is the hallmark of every ex-Jehovah's Witness. No matter what I did, I could never be good enough.
Yep.
And it's just, that's part again of the gaslighting.
That's how they
You're
keep
not
you.
good enough, so that you have to look to them in order to be told how you can be good enough.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then the constant striving, trying to reach good enough, which you can never hit. It doesn't
But
matter.
it does. So yeah, like there's no such thing as perfection. And actually I'm perfect just the way I am right now, right?
Yeah.
I'm holding both those dualities, but it's taken a long time, right? And I don't know about you, but my perfectionism isn't about doing the task perfect. I mean, I do that. That doesn't even count. It's about being not awful, right? It's about the being of me. Because if you put a task in front of me, another one of my hallmarks, right? I've worked on much better now, but if you put something in front of me, I would invariably do it really, 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 really well. Even though I have to die in the process, it doesn't matter, right? Absolutely. You know that one, right? So yeah. But the task, forget it. Tasks are always perfect, right? Whatever. But
By
it's the
default, I'm
me
going to do
thing.
that perfect.
By default, that's like whatever. Yeah. I don't even have to think about that. That's not how I beat myself up because I made a mistake or whatever. I can even live with mistakes. It's being a mistake. That's the deep carving, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that is, isn't it? That
Mm-hmm.
being, it's who you are. It's
Yeah.
not just, it's what you do can be the manifestation of how terrible you are as a human being. The way,
Yeah.
Again, guilt is I did a bad thing, shame is I am a bad person. And these groups like to use shame and really cut to who you are at your core based on everything that you do, being a reflection of that. So no, that's so common.
Yep. I'm not unique. Yep. It's excellent.
Welcome to the club.
Welcome to the club. And I was so happy to find the club, right?
Yeah.
And I've been at this for a long time before I found the club, but it's a really cool club to be part of. It actually really is.
It
really
is. And it's
yeah.
nice to know you're not alone.
Oh, it's so nice. Yeah.
Because for so long we were made to feel alone.
Uh-huh.
So for you, so we talked a little bit. So you had this childhood. We talked a little bit about at home how things are going with your dad, then with your mom when you would go see her. Where did school come into this? Were you homeschooled? Did you go to a public school? Did you have a life that I guess kind of took you outside of both of these environments?
Yeah, that's the other way I'm different is that I had a life on the outside. So, I mean, with my dad, but then also school. When I do book readings now, people always say to me, "How did you end up at Cornell?" Because I went to Cornell for undergrad. And if anyone from my high school is there, you have to know New York City to know this. Anyone from my high school will be like, "That's because she went to Stuyt." So always a student, always like when I was in, running the household and all that, 5th and 6th grade, my teacher made up a grade AWD, A with distinction, because I got too many A plus pluses. So she needed a higher grade to give me. And,
Wow.
and I test easily, but I always did it perfectly. And when we moved into New York City, my dad, Danny, You can say many things about him. And he did some things really well. And even all the not good things he did do them thinking they were in our best interest, which is also the weird thing about when you look at this, when your parents think they're helping you and they're actually not. But so when we moved into New York City, first he gave us a month off to do nothing because of the craziness we just gone through. And then he went to go put us in school. And so it's 70s in New York City. There aren't a lot of good public junior high schools. There were apparently 2 relatively near us, neither in our district. And so he took us to one, and the principal said, you can't come in here. And he's like, then my kids are not going to school. And so the principal let us in. And so I went to this junior high school, which was whatever. It's New York City. It was crazy. There was a lot of violence and all that, but it was a feeder school for Stuyvesant High School, which is an academic, it's one of the specialized academic schools in New York City. So I'm in this junior high school that feeds me into Stuyvesant. And I'm getting all A's, and I'm apologizing for getting only 96s on my tests and that sort of thing. So I do really well at Stuyvesant, and that is what ends me up at Cornell. So it's, So my dad valued education, and the church. I mean, Cornell's bad because the only thing you should go to in the church was Harvard, Yale. So I knew that I also had failed when I got rejected from Harvard and Yale. That's all Moon would ever talk about. So again, it's all his kids, I think, went to Harvard. I do.
Why Harvard? Why are Harvard and Yale okay? So it wasn't a moratorium against college. It was just Harvard and Yale are okay, and the rest are not.
Yeah, it was just, you need to be that good, that smart, that high achieving, that best, that, from the outside. Yeah. So anyway, but so yeah, I only went to Cornell. Lowly Cornell. I will tell you my when I left, the whole high school boyfriend thing, that kind of thing. But you have to know the New York systems. But he was at a state school, and he's at Binghamton. His sophomore year, he went to Binghamton, and I was at Cornell, and he used to be like top of the states, bottom of the Ivies. But that's a whole different thing.
So how did school impact you? Did it have any impact on you? Obviously, you had this outlet, I guess, for your perfectionism to some degree in the in the education. But did you make friends? Did you fit in? Did you feel a part of anything there, or did you always feel alone there, as kind of separate there as well?
So in junior high school, well, I used to wear a button with Moon's face on it to school every day. It wasn't the smartest idea. Very few people were reviled as much as he was in the early 70s, mid 70s. And then by the time I got to high school, I knew better than that. So I had friends, but I didn't get that close, right? I had friends in school, but I was never around on the weekends. I always went upstate. Like, where are you going? We're going upstate, because at that point my mom was in Westchester County, a little bit upstate. So I never told anybody. I never let anybody in. I just kept it at a distance. I knew they were sinful and I loved them, but right, my life, my best friends, my everything was the church. I was like kind of biding time till I could get back. To this day, I saw one of my friends, and he was like, "Yeah, we used to always be like, where does Lisa go? Where does Lisa go?" But then they were like talking one day after school, "Where does Lisa go upstate?" And my junior high school, having been a feeder school for my high school, there were a couple people who knew, and one of them came up and went, "Hey, she's a Mooney. Do you not know she's a Mooney?" And they're like, "No." So I really, until I started to pull away, when I can tell you that story, I just kept myself very separate, very separate. I still remember the history teacher who likened early Christianity to the Moonies. And I'm like, does he know? He's so right. Oh, thank you. But like, I told no one because I knew better than to tell anyone.
Okay.
So my brother and I kind of hid in plain sight.
Right. So kind of like, I guess, as Jehovah's Witnesses, we could have acquaintances at school,
exactly.
But you weren't to call them your friends. Yeah. So the people you were around, and you might have had a little friendship there at school, you might have let your guard down a little bit, or maybe you didn't even, but you were still not allowed to, like, it was always that arm's length, pushing everybody away, so that you could never actually have any kind of true relationship with anybody.
Yeah. I don't think I think I did more than I thought I did, because I still have some friends from that part, and I do love them and they do love me. But it was definitely at an arm's length, right? Because life was about living for the Messiah. And if you could be hanging out with the Messiah's kids or with these people, which would you choose?
Yeah. That's some pressure there. So, well, let me ask about that then. So,
Yeah.
you hang out with the Messiah's kids,
Yes.
and you are the sinful one,
Mm-hmm.
right? In the pecking order there. I don't know. I don't even know how to ask the question. What's that like? Because I don't know what that would be like to even ask an educated question about. How did you feel being in contact with and being friends with them? And were they supposed to be friends with you? Was that okay?
There's so many answers there. So it was more okay than them being friends with people outside the church. And when they moved to the States was just about when we joined. So they had no friends, and all of a sudden there were no kids. And they were, and here we were. And so it was like, oh, kids. So it was better than truly, we were viewed as better than the outside world because at least we knew the truth. It's this feeling of, first of all, you do whatever the hell they want. You follow them anywhere. Like and their lives sucked, by the way. So they had no rules, no structure, could get away with anything. And at the same time, absolutely always scrutinized in that fishbowl, right, under it being watched, right? Literally, we would throw rocks at members when I used to hang out with Hyojin, Reverend's oldest son by that marriage. And people would be like, oh, thank you for throwing rocks at the Messiah's son, throw rocks at me. Thank you. Right. It's
Okay.
warped. Right. But again, that you don't, like, we'd be at his house. I'd be swimming in his pool. I remember I was best friends with Injun, going up to her room and knowing, oh my God, like, I don't deserve to be here. I don't deserve to have my feet on the ground. I'm like totally shame-based, totally lucky, totally confused, right? And you have to know also, again, I was this like really goody two-shoes kid. They weren't. So like, I'm the one who's like, oh no, we shouldn't do that. Oh no, you shouldn't sing that song. Oh, that's a bad, sinful rock song. Like, don't sing. Like, I'm the one who like wouldn't do. So it was a mind warp. It was just in so many ways a mind warp. And long story short, when I, have gone back to reconnect with Injun, I can still feel it. Like, I'm with her. I'm like, we used to bow. Like, I have another friend, she was like, I don't believe anymore. And I bowed, right? Like, it's this really weird feeling of, oh, you're not way above me. You're actually here. But that's really weird for my brain. And also, I never shared my story with them. Like, Injun found out the story of my dad when I went back and reconnected with her, not intentionally, in my 40s or whatever it was. And she's like, I had no idea. I'm thinking, why would I tell you? I'm at your house. I'm at the Messiah's house. Why would I say I live with Satan? Why would I ever tell you? Right. So it was just lucky beyond belief, completely undeserving, weird dichotomy. Really weird. If you think
I'm trying to put myself in that place. Did you ever have any moments of just, I guess, realness with them, like, where you maybe let your guard down in some way, or they let their, well, I don't know if they had a guard up or not.
I think they had a guard up. I think they let it down. I think it's really weird to grow up as a Messiah's child.
Yeah, it has to
It
be.
messes with your head beyond belief. I definitely, right. So whereas I never felt lucky enough, I always felt like I had to serve them, but we were close, and there was that sense of, I was like one of their only outlets, right? We would run away from the guards because they had bodyguards, and we would run away and hide. And it was like a place to be free with somebody where they didn't have to be. We were just friends. Like, even though I didn't see us just as friends, at times they definitely saw us just as friends. I do hear that as they got older, they were less able to do that, and they more saw themselves as their stature or their status. But with me, it really was just friends. But so it's like totally real, but not, because it was a really weird thing. But I probably was a safe haven for them because of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, so as a kid, one of my outlets, I love to play basketball.
Mhm.
So if I'm playing basketball with the Messiah's kid, can I block his shot? Or am I
Yeah,
in trouble for blocking his shot?
exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Exactly.
you can,
Exactly.
do I have to just let him score at will, or can I play? Like, I don't know. That has to be extremely confusing,
Yeah.
as like, because you're naturally going to be better than one of them at something.
Uh-huh.
Are you allowed to show that, or do you have to suppress yourself in those
Yeah,
moments?
you're not really allowed to be better than them at something, right? So in some ways it was totally natural, and that's what was good because they could be totally natural, and we weren't like everybody else who would literally let them throw rocks at them or spit on them and be like, thank, like it was, they were like, so revered, and we didn't revere them in that blatant way. But yeah, but you are aware of like, well, I don't like this food, but they like it, so I should eat it, and I don't want to do this, but they like it, so I should do it. And they say, you know, Hyojin used to, I remember once, like he had not me, maybe because I was the girl in the group, but everybody else had to get in the trunk of the car while he drove it around the Barrytown estate, right? And like, he'd be like, get in the trunk, and they would get in the trunk because, right? And so, yeah, it was a really bizarre scenario. Yeah.
I just really want to swat the shot of the Messiah's kid right now. It's just like, you could just imagine. It's just such a weird position to be put in, and I'm surprised, I guess, or maybe they didn't have many friends because there weren't many kids around. Because that could have put them in a bad position too. Obviously, it put them in many bad positions, but as you've alluded to, but also, you could have somebody who, because they were special, did gun for them. You know what I'm saying? Did
Mm-hmm.
go after them in some way,
Mm-hmm.
and in an unfair way, or targeted them, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
if that could have been the case at some point in their life, because people sometimes want to take a special person down a notch.
Yep.
In those instances, that could have been really tough. Obviously, it would not have flown or gone over well.
Yeah. No, there were like so many different, and
Yeah.
in my not so humble opinion at times, I am in a huge community of second gens from the Moonies, and I'm the elder, right? I've been out the longest. I'm older than most of them. I know many of their parents. It's weird. But I just watch us play out all the different hierarchies and lies we were given and things. Like I just watch. I know I do it too, but I just watch it, and it'll get all blown up, and I'll be like, we're just doing that because that was that family, and this was this family, and that was that. And it's like, yeah, there is
Oh, yeah.
huge pecking order going on. Huge pecking. I'm one of the few people who has compassion for Moon's children because I grew up with Moon's children, and by the time apparently I left, many of them were not so nice to the other kids. But that makes sense. If you're raised by a narcissist, you often become a narcissist. So it's like, what are you going to do with that? But
Yeah, absolutely.
doesn't excuse their behavior. Like I hold all those dualities. I'm the one who holds all those weird dualities. But yeah,
I feel sorry for them. I mean, that's a tough life.
It's a tough life. It was a tough
honestly
life.
I mean, we were all cult victims.
Yes,
I mean,
they were as well.
those who are still in are as well. Even if
Yes.
they, again, doesn't excuse their behavior in the moment. Doesn't mean that they're healthy people that we want to be around a whole lot. But they're still human beings.
Still human beings, still victims, still.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So how did things go as you went through your teenage years and went toward then?
Here's what happened.
Yeah, how things.
So here's what happened. So I the summer between sophomore and junior year, I'm in Seattle proselytizing, trying desperately to bring people to God. I must have looked like a 10-year-old going up to strangers on the street, but that's what I did. And then the summer between junior and senior year, my dad, Danny, sends me to music camp. And to this day, I'm convinced it's to keep me away from the church because, again, every other summer, every other holiday, I'm always there, and he never spent money on us. It was like sex and actually at that point, Baroque recorders, but that's how he spent his money. Not sex. I mean, drugs and Baroque recorders. I don't think he paid for it, but that's okay. So he sends me to music camp. The first time I'm on my own without the church. And I become friends with people who, for the first time, beknownst to me, are gay or bisexual, which is big sin in my puritanical church. And I'm very close with them, and I'm very confused. And I write to my mom, and I'm like, what do I do? And she says, they're sinful, they're evil, they're satanic. You can either convert them or just stay away from them. And for the first time, I don't agree. It doesn't make sense, right? And maybe you know this. We were literally taught if you ever question anything, it's Satan inside you, right? Trying to win you back from God, right? And everybody has failed God for 6,000 years. And Adam failed, and Eve failed, and Noah failed, and Jesus failed. Like everybody failed, and you're failing God, and Satan's in you. So the first time I think, I don't know if I agree. And I couldn't have probably said love at that point, right? I really care about these people, and they're wonderful, and they're so warm, and this is really fun. And so I'm tormented because now I know I'm invaded by Satan and I'm confused. And then I come home from music camp. And again, I'm best friends with Moon's kids and also with blessed children who are about my age, from the early Korean members. So they're really special blessed children. And one of my blessed children friends, 16-year-old friend, was seduced by our Sunday school teacher, a 29-year-old Sunday school teacher, and having an affair, got pregnant. And in order to keep everybody from noticing, because she was jealous of me, she spread rumors about me. She spread rumors that I wanted to have sex with all the men or sleep with all the brothers. And so Moon hears these rumors, believes these rumors, and makes a decree that only blessed children can play with the true children. I like to point out my Messiah banishes me. Like he makes this decree to keep me away from his daughter because the really goody two shoes, like I meet them all now and they're like, oh my God, you were like the sweetest, nicest, purest one of us, but I got thrown under the bus. So he believes this and he makes it and he banishes me.
Okay, let's just stop there for a second. You're banished by your own Messiah and kept from these relationships that you had that you appreciated. Now you're not banished from the church.
Nope. Just from his kids. Yeah.
Still,
I'm not completely shunned. I'm not banished. I'm not thrown out.
Yeah.
I'm just no longer allowed to be. And it isn't like Lisa's bad. It's only many years later that I find out what actually happened. At that point, all I know is I come home and like, you're not allowed to play with Injun anymore.
So you just knew that a rule had changed that only the blessed children could play with the true children. Yeah. You didn't know that it was about you.
I did not know it was about me till many decades later, maybe years later. Yeah, when I finally heard the story of like what happened, and he seduced her, and they had an affair, and she spread these rumors. Like I didn't know any of this. I just knew I came home, and my mom was like, "Yeah, you can't play with Injun anymore."
Wow. Okay. So you didn't know.
Father says it's not safe. Okay. No, I did not know. I just assumed I took it in. Right. I know he didn't say Lisa, go away. But Father says it's not safe for anybody but the blessed children to play with the true children. And then there were no other kids who played with them, but us and maybe us at that point, right? So, but yeah, maybe I elaborated, but I look back now, what my brain must have been like is I'm sinful. I'm questioning. Satan's in me. Father must know it. How does of course Father knows. God knows I'm sinful. Oh my God, right? God knows I'm not safe to be around Injun. That Injun's not safe around me. So
that's tough.
So I go into my, thank you. Yeah. It's funny because I will say that to some of the second gens, the blessed children who grew up in the church, and they're all like, wow. I'm like, yeah, I guess so. I didn't really realize it at the time, but anyway, they must have known that I was as awful and damaged as I knew myself to be. So I go to my senior year of high school thinking, okay, you joined as a 10-year-old. You weren't an adult. Now as a 17-year-old, you're going to pull back, like go on the outside a little bit more, experience it so you can come back in, never question again, commit all the way. Like you can't question, you have to make that adult decision. And so I pull back and I make some new friends and I start hanging out more in school, and I'm there and I hang out with Danny on the weekends, and I'm, going to some parties and movies. Like I'm being part of the real scene, and I like it. And it's fun. And the people I'm friends with are still my best friends to this day, right? There's more love there for me. And I start sharing what's happening. Some of them know, and I'm telling more of them, and they're there with me. And so I'm getting more confused because my church, which is about unconditional love, and this outside sinful world, I'm finding more unconditional love, and I don't. And then I start experimenting a little with alcohol, And then I throw a party for my best friend and also for this guy because he has the same birthday, and I end up drunk and kiss him. And then I have a boyfriend. Because the fall of man is premarital sex.
Right.
Lucifer seduced Eve, had sex with Eve, and Eve had sex with Adam. And we're all supposed to, not have sex until we're blessed in this huge ceremony with the person that Moon has picked for us. So now I have a boyfriend. I'm not having sex, trust me, but I have a boyfriend. I kissed somebody. And my mom is like locking me up and yelling at me, and everybody's stopping me on street corners. And like, everybody's all terrified. You're going to fall. You're going to fall. You're going to leave. You're going to fall. And this goes on, and I just get more and more tormented. And the poor boy proposes to me. We're 17 years old, and he asks me to marry him, right? Because like, we can't figure out anything else to do. And I'm like, I can't say no. I can't say yes. And we just go in this circle. And summer ends, and I go off to college. I go to Cornell. He stays home in New York, and I am determined that I will break up with him. But I don't. And my freshman year, I almost jump off the bridge because it's Cornell. And that's what people do, but I do. I have that moment of, it would be better to die than to leave. Right? I want to have my physical death rather than my spiritual death. And I can't choose. I can't leave God. I'm breaking God's heart because when I left, I still knew him to be the Messiah. I knew he was the Messiah. I knew I was breaking God's heart. I knew I was another person who was a failure for God. And that's a big, hefty thing. So freshman year, I almost jump off a bridge, and I'm tormented. And then I have a dear friend who I must have spent so many nights going, but what if it's right? But what if it's right? And he finally said to me, what if it is right and it's not right for you? And for whatever reason, like, that was my life, whatever, the lifesaver, right? My lifeboat, right? That I clung to. I don't know why that helped, but I kind of clung to that. And as my brother said, I never actually left. I just slowly drifted away versus other people who like leave and make a declaration. I just stopped showing up. But so that was freshman year, and I started having conversations. And then everybody hated the Moonies. Like, Jehovah's Witnesses weren't bad. The Moonies were like the worst of the worst back then, right? Maybe the Moonies and then Hare Krishna, right? Or maybe then and then, Jim Jones, right? But like, Moonies were up there. And so people were like, spent a lot of long nights trying to explain it and defend it. And then sophomore year, I did finally have sex, and then I stopped eating, and I became extremely anorexic. And I was like, I'm not heavy. And I was like 30 pounds lighter, I think. And then junior year, I started doing a hell of a lot of cocaine, including with my dad, which this time was probably closest to my dad. And as I like to say, his friend, the judge, who had really good cocaine. And then senior year, I just got in more and more abusive relationships. And I kept kind of, in retrospect, punishing myself for leaving, but always looking completely functional on the outside, never actually realizing how completely broken I was on the inside or why. So that's the beginning of the leaving.
That's that's a lot of heavy stuff. It's something that I think so many of us have gone through. I don't know how much you know about my story, but in 2008, I had my own bridge moment. Let's say I may not have. It wasn't necessarily a bridge, but it was just every day just feeling like I wasn't good enough. I could never be good enough. Kind of a lot of self-hatred for not being good enough.
Yeah.
And really kind of wanted to go out in this blaze of self-hatred, really. Yep. Because that's just how they make you feel. And if you really stop and think about that, if you're involved in something that makes you hate yourself, then the problem's probably not you. It's the thing you're involved in that's making you hate yourself.
Which is entirely true, but I will tell you, like, the carvings in my brain, I hear you say that, but there's still a click of like, well, yeah, but, right? Which is how well they, when the book came out, I was on Megyn Kelly, when there was a Megyn Kelly show. And in the backstory, when they interviewed me, the producer said, were you brainwashed? And I'm like, I don't think I had a brain to be washed. I was pickled and carved, right? My brain was formed in this. And literally when the book came out, I could not speak badly of Moon. Like, I literally would because my brain wouldn't let me do it. And even when you said that, I could feel that one click of like, well, yeah, but right. That's
Yeah.
how it's in there, which is
Sure,
fine. Which is fine. Yeah.
yeah, that's what you said too about but so I wrote down, what if it is right, but it's not right for you? And there is always, so what if it's right? That's a common thing for Jehovah's Witnesses, right? And it's like, oh, but what if it's right, after they leave? But that shows, again, most people, when they say, but what if it's right? It's because there's a fear attached to
Yes, absolutely.
what if it's right and I'm going to be murdered by my God at the end of when doomsday comes, Armageddon, or whatever the case may be. And so then you see that now the motivation is fear. So far in just these two instances, we have the motivation being self-hatred
and fear. And this is what I got from my religion of God's love, right?
Yeah. Jehovah's Witnesses claim to be the most loving people on earth, that we had the best families, that all this, but when you look around, it just came to where's the love? There's no love. It's lip service. It's just control. And they see control as love. And it's
absolutely. Yeah. Like when you go back to all the insane things my dad did and the inappropriate things my dad did, I do think he did them thinking they were in our best interest, and he was raising us in this very free way. Same with my mom, right? She thought she was saving the world. Like when people were like, I would never be susceptible. First of all, I do believe that I was corrected. Unless you're a sociopath or have a huge psychosis, we're all susceptible because we do want that certainty, right? And it makes us do things that we would never do and believe things. And once you have that, you think that you're saving. Like she did think she was living for God. So many people joined the Moonies for a beautiful vision of one world with God's love. It was a lie, but it takes you a long time to see the lie. If you ever get to see the lie. Yeah. So, yeah.
And that's the utopia. Let's face it. That's what Jehovah's Witnesses wanted too.
Yeah.
This utopian paradise where everybody's united in love and worshiping the one true God.
But the fear that keeps you in there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And the fear of losing that is massive. Or losing that opportunity. And it's funny, people who will say things like, they'll say that they're not susceptible or wouldn't be susceptible to something like that. And then you talk to them and find out that politically or in a sports way or whatever, they're just in another cult, or something that has just equal power over them. You know what I'm saying? And they've gotten that certainty and they've gotten that purpose and they've got a very tight community and a bubble, and everybody listens to one another and perpetuates a thing. And nobody tries to nobody communicates. There's the us and the them, and nobody's communicating across that divide. And it's just, it's just what humans do. We're tribal creatures.
Just what humans do. Yes.
Break off into groups in different ways. We find our people. And it's, and unfortunately that means that then there also has to be those people over there.
Exactly.
We start finding our people too hard.
Well, and it's interesting when you talked about the fear, right? Because I don't know if it's as true for many of the second gens, many of the blessed children I've met, and I think it's different in their experience. But any other first generation that I've met, just about who is out, there's always at some point finally admits, if they're actually out, right? A lot of people are physically out and still mentally in. I run into them all, I run into them all the time. They're like, yeah, but he's still the Messiah. I just didn't want to do it. Like, he's not. But just about everybody has that moment of, what if I die and I really, really blew it? Right?
Okay.
Like, what if it was true?
What's the punishment for you guys? Like, so for us, if we didn't do it right and we died, we would just be dead, asleep. Like the punishment is just not getting the reward.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's no like fiery hell or anything like that. What was if one of you died, what would the punishment be that you would be afraid of?
Well, see, I think it's even worse because I don't have fiery hell. It wasn't fiery hell. It was just that I really did break God's heart.
Codependency with God.
Oh, no one's ever said that before. That's so excellent. Yeah. Yeah. I am responsible for God's pain. Yeah, and I've worked a lot on my codependency. I got saved. I finally got saved when I found myself crawling into an Al-Anon meeting and learned all about this stuff. But I've never thought about my codependency with God before. Yeah, I was responsible for God's pain, and it was my job to heal God's suffering. And that is so untrue and such a hefty burden to carry. Hence the perfectionism and the, because God, you want to hurt God? How can you hurt God? God's been crying for millennium. Yeah.
God needs to get over it. God needs some therapy or some coaching. God needs to talk to somebody about this.
And move on.
and
God needs to take care of God's own pain. It's not my responsibility. Yeah, it's fair.
Yeah, he needs to grieve some things, come to some acceptance around some things. He's made some mistakes.
I love that. By the way, my God is love, and my God's pronouns are they. I rejected the whole masculine God thing because I mean, you can do whatever you want. I don't care. But my God, I'm not doing that one anymore. I've built a whole new, I don't know what I believe. I don't believe in God, but I still use the word, but I believe in love. But it's just the pronouns are like non-gendered.
Well, yeah.
Yes.
I'm an atheist, but I totally so when I reference God, I reference God in the terms with which and the pronouns with which I've often thought about that too. Like, so why is God male or female? Like, and even if you believe
patriarchal religions we grew up in, but yeah,
it's in the biblical account with Jehovah's Witnesses. It says that he created male and female. He created them in his image.
Yeah.
Well, so is his image male or female? I'm kind of confused there.
Yeah, it's a whole different conversation, but yes.
Yeah. It's just interesting how we get into all of that as well.
I believe in energy and love, and
love is beautiful.
That's what I believe in. Love is beautiful. Love is beautiful. That's my God with a little G. That's my, if you need one, God with a little G. Yeah, and I don't do that other one anymore. I just don't. But yeah, because if I did that one, that's what drove me to the bridge, and because I still, right? Like I used to think that my biggest message was I wasn't enough, right? But it's actually, I should have jumped. That's the biggest lie in my brain is that the shame that I did not jump when I should have, which is just messed up.
Because you never should have been driven to jumping in the first place.
No, I never should have been driven to jumping in the first place. Yeah.
And that shows that there's something wrong with the thing you were involved with. Again, it was not you.
Absolutely.
So where does life go from there in your awakening process?
My awakening process. So I leave college and I go back to New York City and I get a job in advertising and I'm living the fine life and I'm looking good on the outside. And then I start dating someone who works. At this point, my dad owns a restaurant. Someone who used to work with my dad, now works for my dad and drinks a hell of a lot and is really mean when he drinks. And I get engaged to marry him. And I'm like, it's hard, but I can do this. And
to marry the boyfriend that you had?
No, to marry the alcoholic that I was dating.
The guy who worked with your dad.
Yeah, the guy who worked with my dad and partied with my dad. And I knew when I was a kid because he partied with my dad and 9 years older than me and whatever. And so I get engaged to him. And a cousin whose wife is in recovery sends me to Al-Anon. I'm like, just go to Al-Anon, right? They know the 12-step program for those of us with our arms around the alcoholic. And I crawl into my first meeting thinking, tell me if he's an alcoholic. There's no way I would ever be with an alcoholic. Like I'm way too smart for that. Because again, I'm completely functional on the outside. So my dad drank and drugged every day of my life, just about. My dad's dad was in AA the last 5 years of his life. And my grandmother and father used to say he was only nice because he had friends. It had nothing to do with sobriety. My grandmother, my dad's mom, was addicted to every pill, whatever. Like there's plenty of reasons I would be with an alcoholic. Oh, and I grew up in a cult. Right. And to step back a minute, my sophomore year, when I became anorexic and they finally sent me to counseling at Cornell, I never mentioned the church once. I come to Cornell, a Mooney, my freshman year, go through this process where I'm pulling away and everything happens and end up anorexic and in counseling and never mention it because she will only judge me for it. Nobody would have any compassion.
I smiled because we were told that if we were dissuaded or discouraged from going to any kind of secular therapy. But if you do, Don't say
Don't
anything.
mention, right? Don't say anything. Yeah, my dear friend in Scotland, he went through he almost walked into a loch, and he has that same thing. Like, I couldn't go for help because exactly. Brilliant. It's brilliant the way they keep you. It really, really, really is. I will come back to your question. I read a fictional account of someone in England who went to a Mooney weekend to save their sister who got indoctrinated, and just watching her get, needless to say, she gets indoctrinated by the end, and just to watch the way they brilliantly use our brain to, right? And that's one of them. I don't ever tell anybody because they won't understand. So I crawl into Al-Anon, right? Tell me if he's an alcoholic. No way I would be an alcoholic. And I stay. And, then one day I by mistake crawl into an adult children of alcoholics meeting, and they read the laundry list of children of alcoholics. And I'm like, yes, yes, yes. Doesn't everybody yes, always no, yes, 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 yes. And you're like, oh. And then, and as my brother likes to say, you sit in a room of like 100 and something people who all have these really hard lives, and you tell your story, and their jaws all drop. And you're like, oh, it's not just weird. It's not good, right? So then it was like, and I became my past, my disease, my childhood, my everything. I did not get married to that man. I managed to pull away and, start a whole new life. And, and then that was 1987. 1987 was my first Al-Anon meeting, right? And I slowly pulled away and slowly healed and slowly uncovered more. I don't even call it an onion, right? It's not the layers of the onion, and it's not that staircase you keep going down or up that everybody talks about. Have you ever gone to knit or crochet and you have a ball of yarn, but you forget to make it into a ball? And so it just becomes this crumpled mess that like takes 10 hours to unravel.
I'm picturing, so I don't know much about yarn or whatever. I can kind of understand what you're saying. There's a type of open face fishing reel.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Back, you get a bird's nest and the line just all pops out. That's just a disaster. Like, you'll never.
It's a disaster, right? And I'm like,
I get that.
So that's 87. This is 2021, and it's been different therapies and different practices and different healing, and I am good, and but like the book came out in 2018, and that's when I first found the community of cult survivors, because I never knew it was there, which was like, whoa, this is amazing. And I realized that I still thought I was damaged. I'm not damaged. I have damage. It's very different, right? And so it's still this endless process of, I just believe in love, right? And I just believe in self-love. And that, as I am an executive coach and a leadership consultant, and I'm the one who's talking to, C-suite and Fortune 50 companies going, you really just need to love yourself more. That's really all it's about. And then maybe love other people, but first you, right? Put your own oxygen mask on first, dude, right? It's just been a learning and a reshifting and and teaching my brain. My brain is now being like, maybe my next book is, what if it's not right, but it is right for me? I get to figure it out.
Yeah.
I'm 57 and I've been shunned, and I'm still, and it's glorious and wonderful and hard work and terrifying and amazing. And I did EMDR therapy for a while, and I've done it a lot. And there was a period where my therapist would only let me come at 5 o'clock on Fridays when the building was empty, because I would scream for an hour. But life is good.
Isn't it amazing how, first of all, let me say that as you were talking about that, there's a great book out there, because I grew up, my dad is the child of alcoholic parents. My dad never drank, but he ate sugar, and that's eventually what killed him at a younger age than should have. And there's a great book called The Narcissistic Family. I think it's written by a clinician for clinicians. It's been a long time since I read it, but I picked up the book because someone had said that the book was about these families where there was no alcohol present, but they had all of the hallmarks of what you would see in a family where there's alcoholism present. And I read that book and I was like, oh my goodness, that's my family. And, and that really, hit home a lot. but also this feeling of grandiosity can be, I'm the best in the world, but grandiosity can be like, I'm the best at being the worst. I'm the worst.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the opposite side of that coin. And so a lot of
Yeah.
people walk around with that same feeling, because in the end, yes, Lisa, you have damage, but so does everybody. Like, we all have damage, and
Yeah.
we all have
Yeah.
things, and it's just a part of us, and we're all works in progress. So
Absolutely. And I actually am really blanking proud of where I
you
am,
should be.
right? And I really am, and I do, but like I've worked on my damage a lot, right? And that's we say that with, yes, trauma. I have complex trauma. Clearly I have complex trauma. Like, clearly I touch just about every single one, good or bad. Right. And that old shout it from the mountaintops, don't tell anybody. Or the like, no one had it. This is so bad. No one could be more damaged than me. It really wasn't that bad. So many people had it so much worse than me. Right. That whole thing your brain does to like keep you stuck.
Yeah, and it's not I've heard it referred, it's not the abuse Olympics. You don't get a gold medal for having the most abuse. Like, this comparison thing. In
It's
the
so
end, all of
stupid.
these different types of abuse make us feel the same ways, and
Yeah.
so it's just a matter of working on that, and not doing this comparison thing that we do all the
Yeah.
time.
I
It's
totally agree. I totally agree. And I'm starting to wonder, not that our abuse is worse or bigger or better, but I'm starting to wonder about, like, when you wrap God into it, it is a unique level. It is a unique intensity or something, right? Because I am a coach, and I'm taking a course in positive intelligence, which is really great. And he talks about his perfectionist. He calls it the stickler, and it's all about getting the tasks right and not making mistakes. And again, it's not about not making mistakes. It's about the fact that I am a mistake, which maybe is what other people feel too. And I've just been at this so long, I can identify it. But I'm wondering if, like, it's when I watched Spotlight, the movie about the Catholic Church and the abuse in the Catholic Church, and one of the victims said, when it's about God, when you've been abused by God, right? It's a wacky
it's another
level,
level.
but another level. Yeah, I
We
got
just
it.
add little nuances onto it
Add little
again,
nuances. Yeah.
like we
Yeah.
talked about, I think just a little bit pre interview, cult Mad Libs, right?
Yes.
It's just adding the different nouns and adjectives and adverbs and verbs, and
Yeah.
it's this. And so, abuse. There are a lot of people who were never experienced religious abuse or religious trauma, but they've got it in another way,
Yeah.
and we all
It's
have to
We all have it.
put
Yeah.
in the work to,
Hopefully. Yeah.
if
I
we
mean,
want something different, we've got to do something different, and that means we've got to reach out for help, because
yeah.
these injuries were caused in relation with other people. They weren't
Hmm.
caused in a vacuum, and it's
Hmm.
typically going to be through relation with other healthy people that we're going to usually bring ourselves out of those things.
Yeah. I mean, and so I do say my story is unique. So far, my brother is the only one who has this, like, two crazy, stupid worlds, right? I know other people do, but I don't know a lot of them. But the themes are universal,
Yeah.
right? The themes, everybody's walking around with shame. They may know it, they may not know it. Childhood stories, they may know it, they may not know it, right? And I guess as I'm doing this positive intelligence course, and some of the other coaches in my pod are like, "Wow, you work at this really hard," and I'm like, "Well, when your life depends on it, like, yes, it's also my perfectionism and my drive, and I know that, and it's a great learning. But when your life depends on it, you do, the good thing is I go at it hard and I get a lot of joy out of it, right? And I luckily get reached out to by strangers, and I always remember some young adult reached out to me, and her story was horrific. And all I could say was, one, I love you, my heart goes to you, and two, I do know that those of us who have suffered trauma have more of an appreciation for life and just simple, oh my God, the sun's out and this cup of coffee is really good, or I just spoke with my best friend, or whatever, just hug somebody, than people who haven't hit those depths. So I wouldn't wish the depths on anyone, but and maybe it is just like that, I guess the opposite of, sour grapes, but like, I do know that I have a huge depth and intensity of love because I've managed to go through this hell and come
Yeah,
out.
we
So,
all walk
yeah.
away with some lessons because of some unique circumstances and situations that the average person may never get, at least not in that way. They may get it somewhere else through their own trials and tribulations.
Yeah.
Talking about having this gratitude and everything. So where did life take you? So you started opening up and all this. Your book. What is your book?
I don't have it. It's called To the Moon and Back. I usually have it with me. To the Moon and Back, A Childhood Under the Influence. It's my memoir. I'll say anybody, if you Google me, my name is unique enough, and there was enough publicity when the book came out because cults are hot that I'm still the first 3 pages, I think, on Google. If you Google Lisa Kohn with a K. But so yeah, I when I when I first got into Al-Anon and I tell my story, people's jaws would drop and they'd be like, "Oh, you should write a book. You should write a book. You should write a book." And about 20 years ago, I started writing a half self-help, half memoir because I was a coach and I was going to write an inspiring book. And yeah, it took a long time for an agent to finally say, write a memoir, to which, as I can only make fun of myself, I said, I don't want to write another Glass Castle because I wanted it to be about hope.
And love
she
that
said,
book.
I know. Well, so do I. And she's like, you should be so lucky as to write another Glass Castle. I'm like, you're absolutely right. That was one of the stupid things I've said, right? But I love that book. And I've been compared to that book, right? But yeah, so it's To the Moon and Back, A Childhood Under the Influence. And it talks about life before, getting in, getting out, and, kind of flash forwards to now where I'm okay, whatever the hell that means. But yeah, I been out for decades. I married 20. Oh God, I should be able to do this. This year will be 8 years, I think. I have 2 kids who are really, way taller than me. You can't tell I'm also really small, but really happy, healthy kids. When I had kids, all I wanted was them to know they were loved. And they both do. My younger one knows it so well that when I said that once, he's like, well, I don't know you love me. I mean, I know Dad loves me and I know Mimi loves me and I know Pop, I don't know you love me. That's how love my children feel. They think I'm annoying. He thinks I'm annoying with that. I own a leadership consulting and executive coaching firm because I launched that in 1995, right before I had my first child. And I, do keynote speeches and work with C-suites and do coaching and leadership programs. And I'm the one who goes in the corporate world and just talks about love. At this point, I'm old, right? I'm going to be 60 in a couple of years. And if you Google me, I'll go in to see a prospect and we'll be like, oh, I Googled you. I'm like, great. Because I didn't used to tell my story because it's the type of story that literally sucks energy out of the room. As you know, you're like, you were in a cult. Now I'm out there with my story and I use it with my clients and I'm out there spreading love as much as I possibly can. So that's good. Really
yes,
good.
I am a huge proponent of own your story, don't let it own you.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
I have, it doesn't have to suck the air out of the room if people are fascinated and you have a unique background. And really, it's not a story of the bad things that happen, but really kind of more one of triumph over that and moving on and being human. And because triumph isn't always, you reach the top of the mountain and then it's all done.
Yeah. Oh God, no, there's always another something, right? As you know, we were supposed to speak on Friday, but I was at Drexel guest lecturing in a class on entrepreneurship and innovation called Ready, Set, Fail for a client who, once he knew my story, said, you need to come in and talk about resilience. Because apparently people think I have resilience, but I do.
I would say you do.
I do, yeah.
I think most of us who leave these types of groups exhibit extreme levels of resilience.
Absolutely. To be able to break away. And that's one of the things amongst the fact that, extremist situations exist, they're prevalent, they're intoxicating and they're dangerous and they're extremely hard to really leave, even if you physically, right? And it's possible, right? And then I also say for anyone who feels hopeless or damaged beyond repair, there is hope. And you are not damaged. And then as a species, we're just so mean to ourselves and we just need a huge dose of self-love. And so this is what I said to these freshmen. I'm like, go take care of yourself, go love yourself. Life is hard. College as a freshman now is hard. It's not supposed to be like this, go, hug the people you're allowed to be near. This is what I get to do for a living. So it's very cool.
That's awesome.
It is awesome. I'm lucky.
So you talked a little bit earlier about having gratitude and the importance of that. And obviously you just spoke some gratitude about the life that you live today. What are the things? So, you've got this life outside of something that you left behind.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you're engaged in the X community. Those
Mm-hmm.
who were formerly from the Moonies. So, what do you enjoy about your life today? Obviously, you've got this coaching practice and everything. That's wonderful. But what do you enjoy personally? Just you enjoying life, or community, the people that you have around you. Where do you get your community certainty purpose today? What is life like, and do you have any goals or anything that you want to add to it?
Try not to do goals too often. I get joy a lot of places. It's an intentional choice. It's a choice I've learned to intentionally make. The way I describe it most now is, so I love the yellow birds. There's yellow finches in the summer, and they just, every time I see, and they fly like this, and they're just beautiful. Every time I see one, I know the universe is loving me. Like, I just know all is good, right? It's made up. I love it. This summer, this early fall, I was in Minneapolis with my older child, and there were no yellow birds. So I'm like, what am I going to do? Like, if I don't have my yellow birds to look for, like, how am I going to know all's okay? I'm a little whack, but whatever. So I decide that I will look for red hearts, red apples. I will look for these things. And in Minneapolis, they have incredible bike paths. It's a great biking city. So I'm biking every day, and I'm biking for an hour every day. And every single person that passes me has something red. A red shirt, a red hat. That person has no red, a little red string hanging off their backpack. Like, everybody has something red, and only I go, see, the universe loves you. It's good. You're good. Feel that love, right? So I create now it's cardinals. My grandmother loved cardinals, and I didn't really used to love cardinals, but now I learned to like cardinals. And if I go outside, I can hear them, and I can see one up in the tree all over there. So I make up things, literally, that soothe my heart.
That's
Right?
awesome.
It is. I think it's awesome. Some people, I don't know what people think. I don't care what people think. I know it works for me, right? But
Yeah, happiness is an inside game. It
happiness
comes
is an
from the
inside game.
inside. It's not about what you
Yeah,
have externally.
yeah. And there's like the 9 people I text "Good morning, I love you" to every morning, and like their friends, their family. Like, I'm all about people. And I look back, I realized that the love in the church was a haven and brought me in. Probably the love of my friends helped get me out. The love of my healing and loving my children helped heal me when I could give all the love I never really got, right? Connecting with people in that way. The people who knew me when are deeply, deeply, deeply carved in me. My brother, right, is my other alter ego, right? I stay in that. I choose love. That's my motto. I choose love. I got a certificate in positive psychology, if you can't tell, to finally get certified in what I do. Anyway, and someone there named me Love Embodied. Because that's because I'm like, hi. I'm gonna curse. I have socks now that say, watch out, I will fucking hug you. Because as soon as I can go near people again, I'm gonna hug people really hard, right?
Oh
Like, I
yeah, I
love
can
the family I
imagine.
get to hug. I remember when I saw my brother at one point during COVID and I didn't go near him. I'm like, this is killing me. And the next time I saw him, the first hug was just like huge, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah. So I find it in people. I find it in things. I find it. I like looking. I look over there out the window. The trees against the sky lifts my heart. I just look for things that I can say, I can think, I can sing, I can look at, I can share with people, I can text to people, I can reach out to people. I'm really good at reaching out and asking for help. I teach a lot of people that asking for help is a strength. It took me many decades to learn that.
Mhm. That's self-love.
That's self-love. Yeah. So yeah, there's the beginning list of my endless list of how I get through the day. Yeah.
So for you, it all comes down to love.
It all comes down to love. I mean, yeah, all the love I have here in this family, in this home. Yeah, absolutely. All the love I have and the people farther away. It all comes down to love. That's why my God with a little G, God X, the they pronouns is love. It's just all about giving and love and receiving love. And it's funny because when I first wrote the memoir and I was looking back to look at what was good, I thought, well, maybe I got that loving heart in the church because I made an active decision to be so loving. And when I reconnected with Injun and with the other kids I grew up with, they were like, no, you were that way when we met you. You've always been like that. I'm like, so maybe that's just part of me, right? That
Yeah.
probably a huge need for love, but a huge need to express it. So yeah.
Well, I think that's a good point for anyone listening. You know, we leave these groups behind, we leave a life behind, but don't throw it all away, because there are things you can see if you go back and kind of do an autopsy on that part of your life. You'll find things about yourself that there are qualities that you expressed and that you showed that you may not see.
When
You were
in
still
the
there.
in the beginning of my leaving, right, when I was engaged to the alcoholic and getting out of that, I was in group therapy. And when I left, I like ignored it all. Like, like I shunned it. It shunned me, like nothing to do with it. Everyone I knew and loved, all gone. It was like these 10 years never happened. Pivotal years never happened, which, right? And I was with a therapist, and she said, you need to integrate the church in order to heal. And I believe I cursed at her. I'm like, there's no blanking way. Only way I survive is not ever looking at it again, because if I think about it, I need to die, whatever. But for me, maybe it's not everybody's process. My brother would say it's not his. For me, I went back to just about every place. I've connected with just about every person. I needed some of them I connected. I'm like, okay, I don't ever want to see you again. Some I keep at a distance, some I have in, right? And connecting with the community that knows my experience has been amazing. For me, I had to touch it and say, yes, it happened. Yeah, I'll never forget the first time I went to Barrytown. We just drove by, and tears are pouring. And then I got permission to go walk the building, and I walked the building with my older child, just the hallways where I was with Moon's kids, and seeing it. It was just like, it's incredible healing process, right? So yeah, that's been my process.
I think what you said is accurate. Not everyone is going to have the same process or be able to handle going back into all of those situations, but everybody has to do what they
Their
need to
way.
do. We're all individuals.
Exactly.
I just, I guess if I was going to say something here at the end, I just want to say that, I appreciate you keep using the word love. And I think what I'm touched the most by is that, your kids know you love them. That gets back to your life, the way you grew up, what happened with your mom, but also, I think and you love them for who they are. You don't love them only if they follow one prescribed path that you've laid out for them. And I think that's always one of my favorite things, is to watch people break the cycle and then start their own families and then love on their own kids and change their family tree in a way, away from that other existence.
Funny because you crawl into Al-Anon and they do say the disease stops here. Like that was the disease stops here. The disease stops here. And then maybe not everyone has this experience. You have your kids and then you realize that they get some of your disease. No matter how hard you try. Like my older one ended up seeing my therapist with my issues. And I'm like, their life was so amazing. And my therapist said, generational trauma. If yours was here, theirs is down there. But there's no way that I could have, and I wasn't as healed when I had my kid, like it was a long time ago, right? There's no way I could go into raising children and being in relationships with people and not be playing out my shit over and over and over and over and over again, right? But again, there's a whole different level, and they do know their love. And my younger child will only tease me, but my older child will say, yeah, you stopped the disease. You actually stopped the disease, right? Which is lucky, whatever, graced, whatever.
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. That's the word. It's beautiful. Thank you. Beautiful. It's just beautiful. Yeah.